Hello and welcome to Newsday with Jeff A. Hello and welcome to Newsday with Jeff A. Hearn. I'm your host, Jeff A. Hearn. Today's top story. If there is such a thing as foot and mouth disease, then Joe Biden and Kamala Harris must have gotten the version where it's their entire leg. With Biden, it's more of a staccato stupidity. Harris prefers a more robust word salad. So allow me to mash up their speeches and see if you can figure out who's who. My name's Joe Biden. I'm a Democrat candidate for the United States Senate. And we have put together, I think, the most extensive and inclusive voter fraud organization in the history of American politics. I think that, to be honest with you, I do believe that we should have rightly believed, but we certainly believe that certain issues are just settled. Certain issues are just settled, like poor kids are just as bright and just as talented as white kids. Which is why if you have a problem figuring out whether you're for me or Trump, then you ain't black, you lying dog-faced pony soldier. Come on, man. You need to get to the go and need to be able to get where you need to go to do the work and get home. So you go ahead and stack the spaghetti sauce at a store and a supermarket. You control the guy or the woman who runs or brings out the carts on a forklift. What happened? Anyway, Ukraine is a country in Europe. It exists next to another country called Russia. Russia is a bigger country. Russia is a powerful country. Russia decided to invade a smaller country called Ukraine. But we stand with you. Putin may circle Kyiv, but he will never win the hearts of the Iranian people. Which is why it's time for us to do what we have been doing. And that time is every day. And we hold these truths to be self-evident, that all men and women were created by the thing. And America can be defined in one word. Ask the Mafapanahawa. End of quote. Repeat the line. America can be defined in one word. Ask the Hamanafatapai. Let's go, Brandon. Hello and welcome to Newsday with Jeff A. Hearn. I'm your host, Jeff A. Hearn. Today's top story. Generation Z, a generation made so fragile they make eggshells look like forged steel, now want to cancel your keyboards, or at least the emojis on them. At this point, they should just make a list of the things that don't offend them. It would be a lot shorter. Generation Z includes people born between the mid to late 1990s and early 2010s. A generation that has grown up with technology, but clearly not with testicles. Remember when real men stormed the beaches of Normandy? In the same situation today, Gen Zers would just have started learning German. I'm amazed any of you can walk on two legs without the support of a spine. And if I'm a little angry at Gen Zers, it's because one of the emojis on their hit list is my all-time favorite, the thumbs up. What has an opposable thumb ever done to you outside of giving you the ability to use tools? They call it rude and hostile, even saying they feel attacked whenever they see it in the woke place. You heard me. One Gen Zer said, if I took the time to write a thoughtful message, then you shouldn't be responding with the bare minimum. Ooh, sounds like someone wants a medal for writing an email. And why not? They've gotten medals for everything else growing up. What's that saying? Hard times create strong men. Strong men create good times. Good times create weak men. And weak men have a list of emojis that make them cry. On Reddit, some were less offended by the thumbs up emoji, but felt the heart symbol was actually the most inappropriate. One said, to me, the heart is reserved for friends and family. Well, guess what? I just got a reminder email to get my hours in to get paid. So Frank in accounting is getting one. Deal with it. They also don't like the brown swirl emoji. Sounds like someone didn't get enough kisses from Mr. Hanky. I don't know, Gen Z. For a group that hates keyboards so much, you sure are a bunch of strokes.
All right, that was the little bit of a comedy break from Jeff Ahern. And don't forget, his show is coming up this afternoon at 1 o'clock. So I know a lot of folks will be paying attention to that, enjoying that, and checking that particular show out and all in that space. It should be wonderful. And we definitely look forward to hearing about that show and what kind of comedy he's got coming our way. I know he'll probably be talking about the whole situation that went on with the indictment, and who knows, he might even get into some of the other news stories as well. He's always got some things that he is sharing and all in that space. Who knows, he might even get into what happened in Tennessee, because apparently there was a historic ousting of two Tennessee Democrats, and definitely folks are paying attention to that. Some people are making racial claims, as there were three people that were in the protest, and it was the two African American males that got ousted. Apparently, the other lady missed being ousted by maybe one vote, and that was over the whole issue around the gun protest and a number of other things. So that is one of the things that folks are paying attention into in the world. Of course, folks are still paying attention to what is going on with Russia and Ukraine. And definitely folks are now paying attention to what is happening in Israel. Israel launched strikes in Lebanon and Gaza after a barrage of rockets had been fired earlier in that space. So there was definitely a airstrike, and they were saying that that is actually now a rare airstrike that took place. But we'll see what the repercussions might be of this action, as a lot of people are paying attention to things that are going on throughout the world and all in that space. Apparently, Japan has got a missing military helicopter, but they are saying that that likely crashed into the sea, and let's hope that that is the case and all in that way. And we do know that transgender policies are in the news as well. Biden is planning to set new rules for transgender athletes and school sports, and there have been some decisions made and some others that might be made in the sense of what the Supreme Court and others are doing in that case. And of course, individual states are doing things also. And definitely, as we were alluding to yesterday, there is definitely that ice storm that took place over there in Canada, and over a million are without power after that ice storm hit Canada over the last day or two. So that is some of the things that are going on in the world. I'll get to some other issues. I've got my friend Dan Worthington, and we're going to have some conversations about some of the things that are going on, some of his thoughts about some of the things that are going on as well. I don't know how often the military planes go missing. Never having served in the military, but definitely Dan was in that space, having been a military police officer. If I remember correctly, I think he told me he was an MP on one of our past shows, so he might have some ideas in that case as well. But I'm definitely interested to hear his thoughts on that. And he'll be glad to know that here in Durham, there was a whole conference going on about gun violence, and there was definitely some people that were speaking up and trying to figure out how they can curb the gun violence that is going on, and also what actions they might want to take in various neighborhoods. It was actually held at Ebenezer Baptist Church and all in that space. And it's going to be interesting to try to curb gun violence when you're having a city that is also having a shortage of police officers. That was something else that I was seeing on my local news on yesterday as well. And another thing that I was seeing, and I don't know if they have this in Utah, was that a lot of money is being missed from those red traffic cams or red light cams, and all of that is supposed to catch folks that are violating various traffic rules that exist in all in that space. And there was a whole conversation that I was listening to with people that were talking about walking across the street and how they had to be very careful, because a lot of folks were not abiding by the traffic rules. And yes, they might get caught by the traffic cams and all in that space. And yes, they're supposed to get paid, supposed to pay the fine, and then there's also supposed to be penalties if you don't pay the fine, in terms of penalty fines and all in that space. But as the reporters were saying, there's a lot of that that is not covered and is not dealt with, and I'm sure that's the case in Utah as well. But I'll get with Daniel and see Mr. Weatherton and see what his thoughts are in that space and all along those lines. But definitely that is some of the news that is going on, some of the thoughts that were crossing my mind and all in that space. I do know that French President Macron is still over there in China trying to get the Chinese to bring Russia to its senses. And definitely folks are paying attention to all of that kind of conversations. And a matter of fact, during his visit, apparently he said Ukraine is just the cover. It's all about the money, honey. That's apparently a quote that was out there and all in that space. And I do know that Dan talks about that as well. And apparently, if you're wondering about other countries and some of the things that they're doing, the UAE court has dismissed South Africa's request to extradite the Gupta brothers. So apparently those are some folks that they wanted to have called to justice in their country, and they reached out to that Middle Eastern country, and apparently that was dismissed. So we're going to have to learn more about that and maybe other people will have ideas as well. And apparently, there is, we know this is Easter Friday and Good Friday on this particular day. And apparently, there is a Good Friday agreement that is going on in Northern Ireland. And it is definitely a fragile piece that is over there. But apparently, they have some efforts to have peace on this particular Good Friday and all in that space. We've also talked about Nigeria as well. And we know that we've had some folks on this network that have been from Nigeria, and Nigeria is in the news again as gunmen killed at least 50 in attacks on villages in Nigeria. So we do know that Nigeria has had some issues as well, and apparently part of those issues are around power outages because that is what sparked some of the mayhem in the Benue communities. So that is some of the things that I am hearing as well. And definitely even the BBC is in the news because apparently Sturgeon's husband, Peter Morrell, is released without charges, even though the probe is still on. And of course, people, even SNP auditors, are quitting amid the Peter Morrell police investigation. Like I said, I'm going to bring in folks. And last but not least, we do still have that political actions that are going on. And there are definitely folks that are still protesting about pensions here, there in France, and that protest continues to go on. And there is a lot of conversation about when this particular strife between the government and unions will end. So they're in the 11th day of mass protests against President Macron's pension reforms and all in that space. And I understand that there might be some actions in the whole notion of unions, this time with the Actors Guild, that might be taking place in, of all places, right here in Durham, North Carolina, because I did get a email recently, and I might reach out to folks that I know that are part of that organizations to see if they want to come on and share why they are at the DPAC, which is a large event center here in Durham, North Carolina, and why they are launching a protest. Apparently, it's over pay and all of that. And the DPAC is a Broadway house, meaning that Broadway shows do come there on a regular basis. As a matter of fact, I think Les Mis is playing currently. So I think there is an action today. I don't know how effective that action is going to be today, since it is a very rainy and horrible weather day on this particular day. And then I think they've got an action on Tuesday as well. So I guess they're going to pass out leaflets and let folks know why they feel that they need to be getting better pay as union workers in the acting space and all in that line, and maybe even some more benefits or other things that other folks will come up when they are talking union issues. But I will reach out to none other than those folks that are involved and see what their thoughts are and why they are doing those launches and all in that space. But that's just some of the news that I saw on this particular day. And all along those ways, I hope you're having better weather than we are, because it is definitely some horrible weather. But I knew it was coming because I had yesterday Billy Graham, not the famous evangelist, but we have our own Billy Graham that does a show here and all in that space. And he was actually talking to a wholeness or wellness person, Raven Thistle, and he's in, I believe, Houston, Texas. Is definitely Texas that he's in. And he was telling me that they were having horrible weather and they'd had it for a day and a half, and that it was definitely coming our way. And I think it's arrived. So I don't know how the weather there is in Utah, but it looks like we got some rough weather last night, and I think it's supposed to last all day today and part of tomorrow as well. So not the greatest weather going on here in Durham, North Carolina, but who knows? Maybe Utah's having bright and sunny skies. So how is the weather there in Utah? Dan.
Bright and sunny skies. Now,
That's a good thing.
Mark, I wasn't a military police
Okay.
officer. I was a United States uh, Air Force officer. I was serving in electronic communications engineering and management and information systems, those kinds of things, many years ago. And
Right.
so that was my experience in the United States military.
Okay, cool. Well, like I said, I just know we had that conversation. I couldn't remember exactly what you said, so I'm glad that you corrected me. That's one of the things we do. If we make mistakes, we are glad to be corrected and all in that space. Hey, Dan, one of the things I was curious about, and I mentioned it at the beginning of the story, is apparently there's a missing plane there in Japan. How easy is it to have planes disappear. You were in the military. Apparently, they found fragments of the Japanese Black Hawk helicopter. 10 personnel are missing, and it does look like it likely crashed into the sea. So, is this something that is common in militaries around the world, or is this uncommon? And how safe are those military vehicles as they travel the world, protecting the security of both our nation and many other nations as well?
Well, I read that article. I'm not sure what happened. I don't think anybody knows yet.
Mhm.
But evidently, some sort of mishap happened with that Japanese helicopter carrying military personnel. They, like you said, they found pieces. They don't know much else right now. I guess we're just gonna have to do an investigation.
Mhm.
Uh, Military aircraft are typically very safe. However, sometimes things happen, and people are killed.
Yep, no doubt. Like I said, I know the other big news was what was going on there in Tennessee. I do know that folks are going to have protests. There's protests in France. There's protests all the time, all over the world, and all in that space. And apparently, these three were not happy with some of the reaction to the gun violence there, and they launched a protest. And then two of the folks were expelled. There is some possibility that they may come back, depending on how the appointments go and all in that way. And one lady was spared and everything. So I'm just wondering, are we going to see more of these kind of protests? I know that, we definitely saw what happened with January 6th, and people are still facing the uh, consequences of the actions there. And I think there might even be some people still in jail because of what happened during that time and everything. But I'm just wondering your take on civil disobedience and also the reaction of the Tennessee folks to what I guess they felt was an unfair use of the political um, theater and the political space to have these conversations. Like I said, they did vote to expel two of the three protesters that were there after that incident that happened. I guess it was either earlier this week or last week.
Well, I mean, that's again, it's a state by state thing.
Right.
Uh, I don't care. Um, Evidently, they felt it was inappropriate what they did and voted to expel two of them. The third one was barely not expelled by one
Right.
vote, I guess.
Yeah.
So, I guess until they learn their lessons and to be more civil and uh, uh, be more responsible in how they do things, they're they're not going to be invited back.
Yep, and it'll be interesting to see because, like I said, I think that there will be like some appointment system, and who knows, there might be a tit for tat. They might even wind up appointing the same people back, and if that's the case, do you get expelled again? So, I mean, do we do wind up doing this tit for tat? Because I think I did hear one of the guys say that he was expecting that he might even get reappointed and everything along those lines. So
With
it'll
as
be interesting.
many issues around the world as there are, this one is a minor blip on the. I don't care. I mean, really, honestly.
No, that makes sense and everything. One of the other things, and I definitely want to hear is that thunderstorm again, about your thoughts around what's going on in the space of Russia and Ukraine. I know that Sasha actually did his show coming up at 11, and we actually recorded that. So that'll be airing at exactly 11 o'clock. But, that another thing that has been in the news is China, and apparently China is in the news again, partially because of Macron's being over there visiting and trying to woo China into being more assertive in trying to exert their influence on Russia to stop this war that's been going on for a year and a half. But they were also in the news today because they were apparently a man was sentenced to prison for abuse of a woman that was seen chained up in a viral video. So you got to be careful what you do in for different spaces because it might go viral. And apparently they jailed 6 for up to 11 years in the case of this chained woman, and China jails this particular man, after apparently he had 9 years of abuse of women, that shocked that particular nation and all in that space. But that's neither here nor there. But what is your thoughts about the notion of China as a power, and will China be able to exert things in the sense of Russia and Russia's violations? And also, do we need to be paying attention to human rights violations that may be happening in China? Because a lot of people will be paying attention to what happened with this case and be saying that that's just another example of China's less than human rights history or positive history, and all in that space. But what are your thoughts about China as a world power?
I think China is in for itself.
Dan?
Can you hear me?
Yep.
Yeah, I
I
think
can hear
China is all for itself. As David has said on many times, the Chinese use soft power to manipulate other governments. Their human rights record is very poor among their own people. They harvest organs from people to give organs to their leaders for operations. Some of their people are so hungry they commit cannibalism to survive because they're not feeding them enough. I mean, they've got a large population. They choose, I guess, this form of government to try to govern them all, but they can't. They're really not taking care of their own. I mean, communism isn't working for them. Capitalism isn't really working for them. I don't think they're committing espionage around the world to gain new technologies. They're trying to influence universities and faculty of universities with money and other things. They're trying to buy up politicians and influence the political power in the United States. They're trying to buy up land in the United States. They're trying to spy on military technologies. They are our main adversary right now. Russia is in heated battle in Ukraine and can't even sustain that war. They're in deep trouble. I think that China would prefer to see Putin withdraw and some sort of a peace arrangement made there, because it's exposing a number of things the Chinese really don't want to expose right now to the world. And so it's interesting. All eyes are on China to see what they'll do. Mm-hmm. America is very vulnerable right now because of the lack of really any strong leadership. And because our economy is so devastated, the Chinese have been trying to use their economic influence to disrupt U.S. currencies and the valuation of the dollar by getting other countries to try to trade in the yuan instead of the world reserve currency, which right now is the United States dollar. So we're seeing a lot of things happening that China seems to be the fulcrum or focus of many of these activities. It's deliberate, it's methodical, and they're going to continue to do the same things that they've been doing until something happens to cause them to change their behavior. I don't see that happening.
How much do you think China plays a part in the apparently, because with that incident that took place with the chained woman, there was a talk about China's role in the plight of human trafficking and trafficked women, and definitely limited women's rights there in rural areas, and definitely just women's rights in general in China. But I'm just wondering, as an observer of society, how much do you think that China has played a role in the human trafficking crisis? Because that is definitely something that is going on throughout the world and everything in that space. But I just wondering, how much do you think China is a major player in that heinous crime?
I don't know to what extent China's involved in human trafficking. I haven't done any reading about that. I know that with respect to human rights, that human life really isn't all that precious to them. Um, it's really hard for them to have a focus on human rights because of the form of government they have. And I mean, people are expendable, right? I mean, look what they did during the COVID outbreak, right? They, lock people in, make sure they couldn't get out. I mean, it's mass extermination in a lot of cases with respect to some people, and depending on your religious beliefs and other things. Who is it? The Uyghurs that are being so oppressed in China and put into camps and all that, and having they're being killed and systematically, uh, persecuted and because of their religious beliefs. And those are the group people that are having their organs harvested, right? The Chinese are involved in research that targets the genetic codes of people in the United States. This field of gain research with respect to COVID was a first attempt at weaponizing a virus that could be used in a military way to inflict as much harm on a nation as possible and disrupt the economics of the nation. It did disrupt the economies of the world, right? But it also managed to kill a large percentage of our senior population and also their senior population, which they really don't want to care for, right? Unless they're in the proletariat, then of course those guys want to stay in power.
Yeah, no doubt about that and everything. One of the things that they're thinking about, even with China, is that apparently it is going to be the host of the Winter Olympics in Beijing. And I guess that this latest human rights violation is going to put a red eye on that and everything. But I was just wondering your thoughts around that and whether politics should be playing a role as much as apparently it is in sports, because we do know that sometimes even athletes will make political statements and all along those lines. But I was just wondering, Dan, your thoughts around this and whether we should be paying attention to even the politics of a country if we're going to be going in these international competitions. And like I said, we did, or the Olympic Committee did pick Beijing to be the host of the Winter Olympics, and definitely I know some folks that might even be doing protests there because of that. But
well, we got good luck in protesting in Beijing, right? So that won't go well for anybody. They'll find themselves either in jail or kicked out of the country. The Summer Olympics were hosted there a while back. I think the Olympic Committee gets influenced heavily by the amount of money that the hosting nation is willing to use in terms of influence with the committee and other things. And so I think it's a mistake for us to be having any of these activities being hosted by the nations that are choosing to act in a rogue way, China being one of them. These activities should be hosted by nations in the free world, not in countries where there are regimes that suppress or oppress their people. But it's a question about fundamental fairness and safety of the athletes, really.
Yeah, that makes a lot of sense. Definitely about the safety of the athletes and all along those lines. I mentioned earlier about these protests that are going on with unions. Definitely there in France. I mentioned action is going to be taking place with the actors here and everything in the actors union. I think it's a SAG-oriented protest and all of that, Screen Actors Guild, and in that name and all in that space. But what are your thoughts about the power of the unions, and should the unions have any power, or have the unions seen their better days? But what is your take on unions and their feasibility on this particular day?
I mean, unions. Purpose of unions is so that they can negotiate on behalf of the workers for better benefits and better pay and that kind of thing, right?
Mm-hmm.
It's really a socialistic concept. It's sort of socialism in motion. And as long as I have no problems with unions as long as they're willing to negotiate in a fair way, and the both sides really are the notion that they're negotiating in good faith. Here's the problem: companies are really being stressed at the bottom line right now, and labor is always pushing for more and more and more and more. And there's a certain point where there's a bleed point that the companies can go no more, because guess who pays for all this union activism, Mark?
Probably the common person.
We all do, yeah. We all pay for it, and so it's like all things progressive. It just ends up costing us all a lot more. Ends up being more of a burden on our financial burden on the people who can least afford it. And for what? For someone to get a dollar or two more an hour and to get benefits that most of us don't get anymore. So I think that the labor unions have become abusive. I think that they're probably an anachronism. It's sort of like the employees of the federal government. Look at the benefits they get. Those benefits are outdated, unfair, create a fundamental drain on our economy as a people because we have to pay for them. Nobody in any sector should have an advantage over another sector just because they happen to work there. And so the labor unions create an unfair balance in the workforce because they create capitalistic forces that are really a tax on the rest of us. And so how's that fair, right? How's that fair?
Yeah, that's a good question. Is how's that fair and everything? I know a lot of people are probably paying attention to that fairness and everything. Hey, Dan, what is your thoughts about the economy and both the U.S. and the world economy? Do you think that we are heading toward a recession or a depression, or do you think things are going to get better? I know a lot of folks are glad that we are supposedly heading out of the pandemic and all in that space, but folks have also been paying attention to the gas prices, particularly after the latest actions by OPEC and everything. And I think they're saying that gas prices may go over $4, but not as bad as they were last year and all in that space. But I just wondering your take on the economy, and do you think folks need to be concerned about the economy even as a political issue? Because I do know that that is what a lot of folks say.
Obviously, this administration has done a very poor job of managing the economy. Many of its choices and policies have been deliberately geared at policies that would cost higher prices of gasoline in their energy policy and other things. It's interesting that OPEC chooses to reduce production at a time when the world needs the energy because we don't want to be, nobody wants to be dependent on gas from the Soviet Union or the other areas that that would help them fund the war, right? And so the downward pressure on production would create an increased pressure and dependence on and create an advantage for Russians. I'm sorry, not Soviets, who don't exist anymore, and the Russian economy. And at a time that would benefit Putin politically, why would we do that? Why would they do that? You have to ask that question. I think some of it has to do with Chinese pressure on the Arab nations and their talks about the yuan and moving away from the oil-based oil as the currency in the United States dollar as the national, or pardon me, world reserve currency. I think there's a lot of things that are at play. Part of the problem is that President Biden, demonized oil and demonized the Saudis and the Arab nations as he came into office, where Trump had negotiated treaties and the Arab Accords, and had created a favorable situation for the United States, business-wise and otherwise. Seems like Biden was bent on destroying everything Trump created that was an advantage to our country. Why would he do that? That's stupid. But that's really created. We're seeing the dynamics in the world today, energy, otherwise, the forces of creating inflation in the American people. Inflation is a form of taxation. Remember that. Inflation is the thing that is the most regressive form of financial punishment that can be exerted on the poor and the middle class. Poor and the middle class are affected most by inflation than any other sector of our economy. Reason is they have less resources to pay for the higher prices. And so this administration has hurt the American people in ways, irrevocably in ways that I could only imagine, by deliberate policies that have been geared at creating higher costs, restrictions during COVID that created bottlenecks in shipping, and with respect to providing of goods and services. It's all about the free flow of goods and services and our economy that makes our economy thrive. It seems like these progressives have been hell-bent on creating and inflicting as much damage to the free flow of goods and services as they could during that period. So they've attacked the energy sector, they've attacked the supply chain, they've attacked it didn't make any sense. I mean, why, unless it was done intentionally? As some people have said, they couldn't have done a better job of screwing things up if it wasn't intentional.
Well, some people might say that and everything. There are two presidential candidates that have come out, and I was wondering your take on both of them. One of them is from a historical family, and I want to know if you think he has a chance to unseat Biden and all in that space. The other one is definitely from a state that is west of the East Coast and all in that area. But I was just wondering your thoughts around Mr. Huckabee from Arkansas, who has definitely said that he is putting his hat in the ring on the Republican side, and Mr. Kennedy. So Mr. Kennedy has said that he is running on the Democratic side. So do you think that either one of them stands a chance? And if so, why do you think they stand a chance?
Huckabee doesn't. He's already seeing it again, right? He's not. I don't think he has a chance. Kennedy, I don't know. I think there's a possibility. It's certainly a legacy name.
Mm-hmm.
But I kind of doubt the Democratic Party would support him because right now they're ironically their only hope is this is President Biden, who is has as many flaws and afflictions and problems as we've seen. And, it's ironic that why haven't we developed emerging leadership that has integrity, that has values, that has strength and understanding to take leadership roles in our country? It just makes no sense that we haven't been able to develop. I do understand, because the political system is a cesspool. Who in their right mind would want to be involved in all that, unless you're corrupt and greedy and want power, right? Who in their right mind would want to have their lives subjected to all the negative crap that these people have to bear? I mean, it just is. It's just ridiculous. It's gotten ridiculous. It's supposed to be an honor, a place of service, and you see these people like Nancy Pelosi and Adam Schiff and all the others who lie their butts off at the American public all the time, and I'm just very disappointed. I don't think the founders intended it to be this way. I don't. These career politicians are a bane on the backside of our country. They are a burden. They should be not allowed to continue to reign the way they have.
Interesting. One of the other things that's been very much in the news is migrant policies. I think that I had heard recently, and I was trying to find that news article, that there was some new money that was going to be going into, I want to say, Mexico and some of the other Latin American countries to encourage their folks not to come over to the U.S. and to build up their own cultures and definitely infrastructures and all in that space. And I do know that there's been definitely some major money that was sent down to, or that Denver is putting into its migrant policies. As a matter of fact, they spent up to $20 million on migrants in just 6 months, according to one article that I had seen in all in that space. But what is your thoughts about the migrant policies, and do we need to be giving money to these countries, whether it's Mexico or Venezuela, for them to build up some of their own country infrastructure and maybe not send as many people down here, and maybe also find ways to fight the various drug cartels?
Well, I mean, obviously, if people are not feeling the pressure to leave their own countries, and they are given opportunities in their own lands, they will stay there. Mm-hmm. And that's a better for them and our country that they stay where they are, because we have enough pressure on our social support systems and our economic systems already. We really can't bear the burden of more people coming in over the borders, especially illegally, in violation of federal and, in many cases, state law, because it's not a supportable system. It's not sustainable in the long run. This administration, particularly, has permitted that. Controlled migration has always been a good thing. America has been well known for its immigration policies, its legal immigration policy. It is a melting pot, a land of the free, a home of the brave. The people who come here illegally, and contrary to the law, should be sent home, or not permitted to enter unless they can prove that they have a situation where they're being persecuted or threatened in their own country. Otherwise, there's no reason for them. There's an application process for them to come legally.
Yeah, that makes a lot of sense. I'm going to mention somebody that I know you don't have the biggest respect for, and I don't agree with everything she's done. Matter of fact, there's some things that she did even when she was in California that I didn't agree with, and definitely she has done disappearing acts on occasion as well. But apparently Kamala is in the news because they are having her go to various states, including, I believe, Georgia, to look at clean energy, which she is saying is the future of the economy. So I'm just wondering your thoughts about this notion of clean energy and all in that space. She also had a quote recently where she said that there's a lot of work to be done on having female leaders in the United States and all in that space. But definitely would love to hear your thoughts about clean energy, less about Kamala, but if you want to go into Kamala, that's cool too. But definitely your thoughts around this notion of clean energy.
First of all, Kamala Harris has been one of the least effective vice presidents that has ever served. I mean, all you have to do is look at her body of work.
Less effective than Dan Quayle?
Well, maybe Quell. You do bring up a point. That was a long time ago. I forgot about Quell. But
Or even Ford, because I mean, Ford was a good president or a decent president, but I don't know if he was the greatest vice president. I mean, he stumbled over
well,
himself a lot.
but look who he was serving, right? Serving under, right? So uh, you know, energy independence is the goal, right? That's the goal. Uh, Alternative energy sources, uh, my opinion, is that our dependence on electric vehicles and other things is a false trail because um, they create more environmental hazard than they resolve. I mean, it's like, okay, so instead of filling your tank with fossil fuels, you're charging your car, right? Got it? And the problem is how is that energy produced? Right? Is that coal produced? Is it what? How is it produced? Is it when you go to a charging station? Is it because that generator is powered by diesel? It's a circular kind of thing. I'm more in favor of hydrogen, but the problem is the technologies are not mature enough yet to mass produce them. They're not efficient enough. They're not flexible enough. Things have not. It makes electronic technology makes us more vulnerable because of the potential atomic threat and the potential that disables those kinds of vehicles for EMP and other kinds of things. So we need to be smart about how we develop our technology. How do we develop our energy? We should have never pursued policies that made us more energy dependent on other nations. The smart thing to do would have been to continue to push and be energy and then independent like Trump had us. And then if they wanted to invest in alternate technologies, do that in tandem with that, right? Because then we don't end up weakening ourselves and exposing ourselves to our enemies and our economy, which we did, and we keep us strong at the same time. We have a vision for the future, and so this push by the Biden administration, Kamala, whatever, however say her name, at the same time has been myopic, short-sighted, because of the lack of a larger vision to preserve energy independence in the United States and to keep our economy moving in the right direction.
That makes sense. I mentioned earlier at the beginning about the conversation that was held here in Durham, where I'm based at, around gun control. It was actually one of our local churches, and definitely there has been gun violence here, just like there's been gun violence all over the country and all over the world. But definitely there were some folks, including some of them, trying to get to come on the network to share their views. Some of them have been on, because I know Leonardo Williams, who is a city council person, has been on, and Jillian's been on, and some others that might have been at that hearing. But definitely there are some folks that are very concerned about gun violence. As a matter of fact, here in our local school, we had a student-led protests that were students walking out because of the gun violence that they have seen. But I just wondering, what do you think is the answer to all of this gun violence? Do we need further regulations of some sort, particularly with the harder assault rifles? But we know criminals can get guns no matter what kind of rules you put on them and everything. But what do you think is the solution to this whole gun violence situation?
There are two types of people that are problematic when it comes to guns, right?
Mm-hmm.
Criminals.
Yep.
And the mentally ill.
Yep.
The person that did all this havoc recently, was obviously very mentally ill. And so anytime you put a weapon in the hands of someone who's mentally ill with the intent to do great harm, there's going to be a problem. We've seen it time and time again. So the problem is mental illness. That's the issue that should be addressed. I mean, okay, So the average American has a number of guns. They always will. That's the way it's going to be. We've got the Second Amendment. But the average person, the majority of people have no intent to use those guns except for self-defense and for the defense of our country. There's no other intention, or to go deer hunting or whatever, right? There's no other intention on their part other than that. Now, I don't know why anyone would need to have an AR-15 as a personal weapon.
Right.
But I don't know how effective those are for hunting or anything else. I just don't know. I had a choice of buying an AR-15 or a 30-30 with a scope for my hunting. I bought the 30-30 with a scope. The 30-30 has long range stopping power, and with a scope, you can narrow in on a deer or whatever you need to. If you have a tag and you need meat, that kind of thing, you can go hunting and kill a deer and have it butchered and put it in your freezer, right? That's what a lot of people have guns for, so they can be sportsmen and go and kill a deer or whatever that they have a permission to kill, so that they can put it in the freezer, and for self-defense and home defense. A lot of people have shotguns at home, so because they're very effective and have stopping power for potential burglars and that kind of thing. A lot of people have pistols for the same reason, because they're a deterrent. If a burglar or someone that intends to do harm knows that someone is armed, they're less likely to pick that place. It's just the way it works. It's one of the reasons why our adversaries are reluctant to invade our country, because they know that everybody is armed to the teeth, and everybody will fight to defend their home and freedom and their families and their religion. That's just the way it is in the United States, because we are freedom-loving people. So, but the problem is the mentally ill and the criminals, right? So here's the thing. The criminals, they have these guns. That you can't have the criminals outgunning the cops. So you've got to have the cops have enough stopping power to stop the criminals. So that makes sense, right?
Well, that makes a lot of sense. Two things I was wondering about. One is the AK-47 going hunting. I've not been a hunter, but I definitely have hunters in my family and everything, so I know what the hunting culture is like and everything. I've definitely enjoyed venison, which is another name for deer meat and all in that space. But definitely, that being said, I think an AK-47 and poor little Bambi, there's not going to be much venison left if you're using that for your hunting. But that's just my thought.
Depending on how you use it, but that's why I prefer a hunting rifle.
I think
and I don't know, I frankly don't know how effective or range that an AK-47 has vis-a-vis. I mean, it's more of a semi-automatic machine gun, basically.
Yeah, like I said, that's what I was thinking. It would shred the poor little Bambi to death and everything. I mean, and you want the deer meat, but I don't want it to be shredded into little pieces and all in that.
Yeah, I mean, ideally, you want a headshot, right? Clean headshot and that kind of thing.
Yeah, you want to have enough to have the meat to have the deer and all in that space.
Yeah, I agree.
Yeah, the other thing I was going to ask, and we're going to wind down, is really quickly, well, how about the power of some of these unions? Because I do think that sometimes maybe the NRA and definitely the pharmaceutical lobbies and a number of other lobbies may have too much power over our politicians, and they might not be willing to enforce some rules that need to be enforced. So
now, NRA is the union. First of all, it's a gun rights group, right? So people join the NRA in order to preserve the Second Amendment. Pharmaceutical companies are not typically a union. They're normally just corporations that make large contributions to politicians to buy influence, right? So it's K Street, and we've seen the most abusive use of that power during the COVID-19 pandemic. They made money hand over fist. And they also made it so they weren't liable for the drugs the injections that they did produce, which we know now are very, very harmful. More people are dying who have been inoculated now the majority of deaths are the people who have had the inoculations and the boosters rather than people who chose not to, which I find ironic. Why is that? I don't know. It tends, but we've had a lot of people die of heart attacks, cardiomyopathy, stillbirths, all these things that have been caused by this crazy alien DNA or whatever they were using in these injections, these RNA thing. And it was a giant experiment by Fauci, Gates, and the Chinese. So I mean, why did we even go there? Why did we end up weaponizing a virus just for the jollies and the gee shucks, let's see how this works. Jollies of this CCP just doesn't make any sense. You there, Mark? Mark. Hello, Mark. You're frozen.
Yep, definitely interesting. Yep. Oh, did I freeze? Hold on. I can't be freezing. Hold
Yeah.
on.
So
Keep
I
going.
mean, but, that's my opinion about how I saw all that unfold, and I think a lot of people would agree with me. It's becoming clearer and clearer that the virus was lab created and generated and deliberately unleashed on the world, and we know for a fact that the gain of function research was funded by the United States in North Carolina lab, and then exported to Wuhan, and then released from Wuhan, and we know who were involved in that. It's just, it's no mystery, and but we've known that from the very beginning, but no one wanted to talk about it. And anyone did was censored.
Yeah. Last thing, and like I said, I know we're wrapping up and all in that space, but it is a Good Friday. It's definitely a very insignificant day in all in that space. So, as a last thing, since we've been in the conversation, the rest of our panel was busy on this particular day. I know Lee told me he was going to be out, and definitely Steve, I think that he'd be out as well. And we know Nick's traveling the world and a number of other things. But any thoughts that you want to share with folks about the importance of Good
Yeah, sure. As we know that Good Friday is a celebration that is in reference to the Savior of the world, Jesus Christ, who is our Lord and Savior, and that through Him that we can see the redemption of all mankind. He didn't come to the world to judge the world. He came to give the world hope and to create a bridge so that we could return to our Heavenly Father, and for our families to be together. So through Christ, there is hope, there's peace, there is forgiveness. All we have to do is accept Him in our lives. Now, for people who don't believe in Christ, let's draw on our higher power, our faith, our goodness, and our desire for peace and goodness around the world and goodwill to everyone. I think I pray for peace every day. I would like to see the war in Ukraine go away. I'd like to see the conflicts come to an end, and our people to be peaceful and happy. So God bless everyone. Thank you very much.
Don't know if Dan heard what I asked him and everything, but I definitely hope that everybody is having a Good Friday on this particular day, and that everybody will have a very blessed Easter celebration and all along those lines. So definitely, I know a lot of folks will be going to various Easter services and all in that way. We'll be back next Monday with more exciting news about what's going on in the world, and we'll be having some guests coming next week as well. But right now, I'm going to get on out of here. I hope that everybody had a great conversation and enjoyed the conversation I was having with Mr. Worthington. And we'll be back next week with more exciting conversation and all along those lines. But you know, these wonders of technology, sometimes they cooperate, sometimes they don't. But right now, we're going to get on out of here. And of course, tomorrow or next week, we'll be talking about other things around the news. Who knows? We might even get into a conversation about that $1 judgment that Gwyneth Paltrow got a couple of days ago, and all in that space because of a ski incident. Or maybe we'll even talk about the news that I heard earlier on the one of the late night shows about there being some folks upset about David and the statue of David. And definitely that should be an interesting conversation as well. But whatever we talk about, it'll be interesting. And we'll be back on next week to share some more thoughts around the news. But right now, let's get on out of here.